Story 22 Foreign Children of Story Hour Readers' Third Year by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. Foreign Children. Little Indian, Sioux or Crow, little frosty Eskimo, little Turk or Japanese, oh, don't you wish that you were me? You have seen the scarlet trees and the lions overseas. You have eaten ostrich eggs and turned the turtles off their legs. Such a life is very fine, but it's not so nice as mine. You must often as you trod have wearied not to be abroad. You have curious things to eat. I am fed on proper meat. You must dwell beyond the foam, but I am safe and live at home. Little Turk or Japanese, oh, don't you wish that you were me? By Robert Louis Stevenson. End of Story 22. Read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Story 23 Great and Little Bear of Story Hour Readers' Third Year by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. Great and Little Bear. Callisto was a beautiful woman whom the god Jupiter admired. The goddess Juno was very angry because Jupiter was kind to Callisto. She decided to be revenged. "I will take away her beauty, so that no one shall admire her," said Juno. Night and day she thought and planned, until she found a way to punish Callisto. One morning, as the fair and gentle Callisto was gathering wild flowers in a field, she was suddenly changed into a bear. Then she was driven into a forest near by. "You shall live in this forest forever! A cave under the rocks shall be your home!" exclaimed Juno. Although she had the form of a bear, Callisto was still a woman at heart. She feared all the animals that she met. The hunting dogs frightened her, and she would hide in terror from the hunters. One day a young man was hunting in the forest. Callisto recognized him at once as her son Arcas. She rushed toward her son to embrace him, but thinking the bear was going to attack him, Arcas lifted his hunting spear. As he was about to strike the bear, Jupiter appeared. The god snatched away the spear just in time to save Callisto's life. Jupiter took both Callisto and Arcas and placed them in the sky. Callisto became the great bear, and Arcas the little bear. They have remained in the sky ever since. On pleasant nights you can see them in the sky as they move around the North Star. End of Story 23. Read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Boy and the Sheep of Story Hour Readers' Third Year by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. The Boy and the Sheep. Lazy sheep, pray tell me why, in the pleasant field you lie, eating grass and daisies white, from the morning till the night. Everything can something do, but what kind of use are you? Nay, my little master, nay, do not serve me so, I pray. Don't you see the wool that grows on my back to make you clothes? Cold, ah, very cold you'd be, if you had not wool from me. True, it seems a pleasant thing, nipping daisies in the spring, but what chilly nights I pass on the cold and dewy grass, or pick my scanty dinner where all the ground is brown and bare. Then the farmer comes at last, when the merry spring is past, cuts my woolly fleece away for your coat in wintry day. Little master, this is why in the pleasant fields I lie. By Anne Taylor. End of Story 24. Read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Boy Who Cried Wolf of Story Hour Readers' Third Year by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. The Boy Who Cried Wolf. There was once a boy who tended his father's sheep on the side of a mountain, near a dark forest. It was a lonely place. No one was near excepting 3 men whom the boy could see working in the fields in the valley below. One day the boy thought he would have some fun. He rushed down toward the valley, crying, "Wolf! Wolf!" The men ran to meet him, and one of them remained with him for a while. The boy enjoyed the company and the fun so much that he tried the same trick again a few days later. Again the man ran to help. Soon after this, a wolf really came from the forest and began to steal the sheep. The boy ran after the men, crying more loudly than ever, "Wolf! Wolf!" But it was of no use for him to call. The men had been fooled twice, and now no one went to help him. So the wolf had a good meal from the herd of sheep. End of Story 25. Read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Lion's Share of Story Hour Reader's Third Year by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. The Lion's Share. The fox and the donkey were friends. One day they agreed to go hunting together. On their way through the forest they stopped at the den of the lion. "Ho, ho, King Lion!" called the fox. "Friend Donkey and I are going to hunt for game. Will you go with us?" "Certainly," said the lion. "I am ready for a good dinner." The lion, the fox, and the donkey set a trap near the lion's den. Then they hid behind the trees near by. Soon a wolf came prowling along and was caught in the trap. They attacked the wolf and killed him. "Let us have our dinner now. I am hungry," said the lion. "Friend Donkey," added the lion, "you may divide the animal and give each of us his portion." So the donkey divided the wolf into 3 equal parts. Then he said to the lion, "Which part will you have, King Lion?" The lion saw how the donkey had divided the animal. King Lion was very angry. He said with a roar, "What do you mean, Friend Donkey, by taking so much for your share?" "I have divided the wolf into 3 equal parts," said the donkey. "If you do not like the way I have divided the animal, you need not take any." At this the lion was furious. Springing upon the poor donkey, he killed him instantly. Then the lion turned to the fox. "There are only 2 of us now," said the lion. "Let me see how you will divide the animal." The fox bowed low before King Lion. He took one very small piece of meat for himself. Then he put all the rest of the animal in a heap for the lion. The lion watched greedily to see what the fox would do next. "This is your share, King Lion," said the fox. The lion was pleased with the way the fox had divided the meat. "Who taught you how to divide the wolf?" he said. Once more the fox bowed low before King Lion. Then he said humbly, "Friend Donkey taught me how to divide the wolf." End of Story 26. Read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Robin Redbreast of Story Hour Reader's Third Year by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. Robin Redbreast! Good-bye, good-bye to summer, for summer's nearly done, the garden smiling faintly, cool breezes in the sun. Our thrushes now are silent, our swallows flown away, but Robin's here with coat of brown, and ruddy breast knot gay. Robin, Robin Redbreast, oh, Robin dear, Robin sings so sweetly in the falling of the year. Bright yellow, red, and orange, the leaves come down in hosts. The trees are Indian princes, but soon they'll turn to ghosts. The leathery pears and apples hang russet on the bough. It's autumn, autumn, autumn late, 'twill soon be winter now. Robin, Robin Redbreast, oh, Robin dear, and what will this poor Robin do? For pinching days are near. The fireside for the cricket, the wheat stack for the mouse. When trembling night winds whistle and moan all round the house, the frosty ways like iron, the branches plumed with snow, alas, in winter dead and dark, where can poor Robin go? Robin, Robin Redbreast, oh, Robin dear, and a crumb of bread for Robin, his little heart to cheer. By William Allingham. End of Story 27. Read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Thorn Rose of Story Hour Reader's Third Year by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. Thorn Rose. In the long, long ago, there lived a king and queen who for many years had no children. At last a lovely baby was born to them, a little princess. There was great rejoicing all over the land. The king and queen decided to have a party in honor of the princess. In the palace there was hurry and stir to make ready. messengers were sent far and near to invite the lords and ladies of the land to the great feast. Among the guests invited to the party were 7 good fairies. It was a beautiful summer afternoon. The roses on the palace wall were nodding their heads sleepily in the warm breeze when the chariot with the 7 fairies arrived. The good fairies entered the princess's room. There the tiny baby lay, sleeping in a dainty pearl cradle. "She is as sweet and fair as a rose," they exclaimed. "We will call her Rose." Now it happened that the king and queen had failed to invite a spiteful and ill-tempered old witch. The old witch was very angry because she had not been invited to the party. After the guests had all arrived, she entered through the keyhole. No one saw her enter. Each of the good fairies bestowed on the princess a precious gift. "I bestow upon you, sweet princess, the gifts of health and cheerfulness," said the first fairy. "You shall be the most beautiful princess in the world," said the second fairy. "You shall be witty and wise," said the third. "You shall have the sweetest voice that ever was heard," said the fourth. "You shall be generous and kind," said the fifth. "Every one shall love you," said the sixth of the good fairies. Just then a spiteful laugh was heard. "Ah, ah, ah!" someone called. The king and queen saw the old witch who had not been invited to the party. "I will tell you what shall happen to this little wonder," said the witch. "She will cut her finger with a spindle before she is 15 years old, and then she will die." The old witch shook her black stick at the princess. Then she disappeared, as she had entered, through the keyhole. The king and queen were troubled when they heard the witch's words, but the 7th fairy, who had not yet spoken, stepped forward. "The king's daughter shall not die, but she shall sleep for 100 years. When the princess falls asleep, every one in the palace will go to sleep too. They will all sleep for 100 years." Then the king ordered that every spindle in the kingdom should be destroyed. Not a spindle was to be used anywhere in the country until after the princess had passed her 15th birthday. The gifts of the fairies proved true. The princess was so beautiful and so good that she was loved by all. She was witty and wise, and her voice was like a silver bell. One day, when the princess was nearly 15 years old, she wandered through the palace and up the winding stairs to an old tower. There, in a little room, sat an old woman, busily twisting thread upon a spinning wheel. The old woman had never heard the king's command. "How merrily the wheel goes round! Let me see if I can spin," said the princess. Scarcely had the princess touched the spindle when she cut her finger. The girl fell at once into a deep sleep. She lay upon the floor beside the spinning wheel, fast asleep. In the castle below, the king, the queen, and all the servants fell asleep too. The horses slept in their stalls. The dogs slept in their kennels. Even the pigeons on the roof, and the birds in their nests, all went sound asleep. Even the fire flaming on the hearth became still. Deep shadows darkened the sunny rooms of the palace, and the garden round about. A hedge of thorns at once began to grow around the palace. The hedge became thicker and higher as the days went by, until at last it was so tall that not even the palace towers could be seen. The story of the princess, the beautiful thorn rose, was told far and wide. At last, 100 years had passed. Prince Courageous was traveling through the land. He heard from an old man the story of the thorn hedge, and of the princess who lay in the palace behind the hedge, fast asleep. The old man told the prince that the time had come when the long enchantment was at an end. "But who knows how great the danger may be?" added the old man. "No one has entered the palace for 100 years." "I will brave the danger, whatever it may be," exclaimed Prince Courageous. "I will find the sleeping princess or lose my life." So Prince Courageous mounted his horse and rode through the woods until he came to the tall thorn hedge. He made his way through the underbrush. The briars were thick and the thorns sharp, but Prince Courageous was strong and brave. He knocked at the gate, but there was no answer. The prince opened the gate and entered the courtyard. All was silence in the palace hall. Only the sound of his own footsteps could Prince Courageous hear. Everybody was fast asleep. The horses in their stalls, the pigeons on the roof, the birds in their nests, the servants in the halls, the king and queen on their golden throne. Prince Courageous tiptoed through the silent rooms. Finally, he reached the narrow stairway that led to the tower. The prince climbed the winding stairs. There, beside the spinning wheel, lay the beautiful princess, fast asleep. Stepping softly to her side, he kissed the princess on the cheek. thorn rose opened her eyes, and there stood the prince. And now all the court awoke. The horses began to neigh. The dogs began to bark. The pigeons cooed. The birds sang. The kitchen fire burst into flame. The sun shone brightly, and the roses on the palace wall swayed in the breeze. The prince and the princess were married next day, and the 7 good fairies danced at the wedding feast. End of Story 28. Read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Wolves and the Deer of Story Hour Reader's Third Year by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. The Wolves and the Deer. Long ago a pack of wolves lived on a prairie. Some deer lived nearby. The wolves could run swiftly, but they knew that the deer were swift runners too. The hungry wolves wondered how they might catch the deer and eat them. At last they thought of a fine plan. They invited the deer to run a race with them. The wolves and the deer started in the race side by side, but the deer ran much the faster. The wolves were very angry. "We will eat the deer yet," they said. One day they prepared a great feast. They invited the deer to dine with them. The deer sat down facing the wolves. Then the wolves said to the deer, "Laugh, you on the other side." "No," said the deer, "you laugh first." "Very well," said the wolves, "we will laugh first." And they laughed, "Ha, ha, 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 ha." "Now, you on the other side laugh too," said the wolves. Then the deer laughed, "Mm." "Laugh again," said the deer. "Very well," said the wolves, and they laughed, "Ha, ha, 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 ha." The deer were frightened when they saw the great sharp teeth of the hungry wolves. They wanted to run away at once and hide from the wolves, but they were afraid. Again the wolves said, "Laugh, you on the other side, but do not keep your mouths closed when you laugh. Nobody laughs like that." Then the deer laughed, "Ha, ha, 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 ha." This time they opened their mouths. The wolves could not see any teeth in the mouths of the deer. At once the wolves attacked the deer. They killed and ate them. Only a few of the deer escaped. To this day all deer are afraid of the wolves. The wolves laugh and show their teeth when they see the deer, and the deer run as fast as they can when they see the wolves. End of Story 29. Read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Cornfields of Story Hour Reader's Third Year by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. The Cornfields. Then Nokomis, the old woman, spake and said to Minnehaha, "'Tis the moon when leaves are falling. All the wild rice has been gathered, and the maize is ripe and ready. Let us gather in the harvest. Let us wrestle with Mondamine. Strip him of his plumes and tassels, of his garments green and yellow." By Henry W. Longfellow. End of Story 30. Read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Story 31. The Gift of Corn of Story Hour Reader's Third Year by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. The Gift of Corn. Long, long ago, a tribe of Indians lived on a beautiful island in the Great Lakes. An enemy attacked the Indians, and they were driven from home. They wandered far away and settled on the shore of a small lake. Braveheart, a strong and powerful Indian, remained to guard the beautiful island. One morning Braveheart stepped into his canoe. He was planning to paddle around the island. The canoe glided swiftly along by the tall trees that grew near the water. At last Braveheart had gone beyond the trees. He saw a vast plain. He paddled to the shore and drew his canoe up the beach. Then Braveheart started to walk across the plain. Suddenly a little man stood in front of him. The stranger was dressed in green, and he wore a green cap with red feathers in it. "Ho, ho, Braveheart!" cried he. "You are very strong, are you not?" "Yes," said Braveheart, "I am as strong as any man. But who are you?" "I am Red Plume," replied the little man. "Stay and smoke the peace pipe with me." Presently Red Plume said, "I am small, but I am strong. Let us wrestle together to see which of us is the stronger. If I fail, you must say, I have conquered Red Plume." Then Brave Heart wrestled with the little man. He found that Red Plume was indeed very strong. He felt himself growing weaker each moment. But at last he succeeded in tripping the man. Then Brave Heart cried, "I have conquered Red Plume." Instantly, to Brave Heart's surprise, the little man vanished. On the spot where he had stood lay an ear of corn. The corn was covered with greenish husks, and the red silk at the top was like a plume. It looked like the little man. Brave Heart looked down at the corn in amazement. Suddenly the ear of corn spoke. "Take me and pull off my green garments," said the ear of corn. "Plant my kernels in the ground and cover them with soft soil. Break my cob into small pieces and throw them near the trees at the edge of the forest. Then depart, and return when the next moon is high in the heavens." Brave Heart did as he was told. Then he went to his canoe and paddled back to his home. He returned when the next moon was high in the heavens. He found the plain covered with tender green plants. Near the edge of the forest green vines were growing. Brave Heart heard some one speaking from the ground. "Come again, before the moon of falling leaves," were the words he heard. One day, when the summer was nearly over, Brave Heart paddled along the island as far as the plain. It was almost time for the moon of falling leaves. There, near the spot where he had wrestled with the little man, stood a field of ripe corn. The red tassels nodded in the breezes, and the leaves rustled in the wind. Near the forest were great yellow pumpkins ripening on the vines. Brave Heart pulled some ears of ripe corn and gathered some of the pumpkins. Then he built a hot fire and roasted the ears of corn. How delicious the roasted corn tasted! Once more Red Plume spoke, again from the cornfield. "You have conquered me, Brave Heart. If you had not done so, you would have been destroyed. By your strength you have won the gift of corn." Then Brave Heart was glad. He hastened to his people and brought them back once more to live, ever after, on their beautiful island. And always the people blessed him for the gift of the precious corn. Brave Heart had conquered Red Plume. End of Story 31. Read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 32. A Boy's Song of Story Hour Readers, 3rd Year, by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. A Boy's Song. Where the pools are bright and deep, where the grey trout lies asleep, up the river and o'er the lea, that's the way for Billy and me. Where the blackbird sings the latest, where the hawthorn blooms the sweetest, where the nestlings chirp and flee, that's the way for Billy and me. Where the mowers mow the cleanest, where the hay lies thick and greenest, there to trace the homeward bee, that's the way for Billy and me. Where the hazel bank is steepest, where the shadow falls the deepest, where the clustering nuts fall free, that's the way for Billy and me. Why the boys should drive away little sweet maidens from the play, or love to banter and fight so well, that's the thing I never could tell. But this I know, I love to play, through the meadow amid the hay, up the water and o'er the lea, that's the way for Billy and me. By James Hogg. End of Story 32. Read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 3. The Frog's Travels of Story Hour Readers, 3rd Year, by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. The Frog's Travels. Long, long ago, in the country of Japan, there were 2 frogs. One of the frogs lived in a pond near Tokyo, and the other lived in a little stream near Kyoto. One fine morning in early spring, these 2 frogs decided that they would travel forth to see the world. Strangely enough, though they had never heard of each other, the same thought came to each frog at the same time. The first frog started along the road which led from Tokyo to Kyoto. He found the journey difficult and the road hard to travel, so when he had hopped to the top of a high hill halfway, he decided to stop a while and rest. The other frog started out on the same road, but from Kyoto. It took him a long time to reach the hill where the first frog was resting. The 2 frogs met at the top of the hill. They were delighted to make each other's acquaintance. "Greetings, friend," said the first of the two frogs. "Where are you going?" "I have a great desire to see the world, and especially to visit Tokyo. I am on my way for a visit to Tokyo now," replied the second frog. "There is no need of hurrying. Let us rest here and stretch our limbs," said the first frog. "What a pity that we are not taller," said the Kyoto frog. "Why?" asked the Tokyo frog. "If we were taller, we could see both towns from this hill. Then we should be able to tell whether or not it were worth while to continue our journey," said the Kyoto frog. "Oh, we can easily find that out," replied the other. "We can stand on our hind legs and take a hold of one another. Then each can look at the town toward which he is traveling," he added. "A fine idea. Let us try it at once." The two frogs stood upon their hind legs, holding each other tightly to keep from falling. The Tokyo frog turned toward Kyoto, and the Kyoto frog turned toward Tokyo. The foolish frogs forgot that their eyes were on the backs of their heads. Although their noses pointed toward the places to which they wished to go, their eyes beheld the towns from which they had just come. "Indeed, I shall travel no further," the first frog exclaimed. "Kyoto is exactly like Tokyo. I shall go home at once," he added. "Tokyo is only a copy of Kyoto," said the other frog. "It is not worth while to take the trouble to journey there," he added. The two frogs bade each other a polite farewell, and each returned to his own home town. To the end of their lives, the two frogs believed that Tokyo and Kyoto were really exactly alike. Neither of the frogs ever again tried to see the world. End of Story 33, read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Merchant's Caravan of Story Hour Readers' Third Year by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. The Merchant's Caravan. Once there was a merchant who had fine silks and rugs to sell. He wished to send his goods to a country on the other side of the sandy desert. The merchant owned a large caravan of camels, and he employed many men. Camels were the only animals strong enough to travel over the desert with the heavy loads. For many days Abdul the merchant and his men had been preparing for the journey. The canvas tents and the poles were placed upon one camel. Great leather bottles of water were loaded upon another camel. Firewood and bags of rice and barley meal were placed upon still another. It required many camels to carry the merchant's goods. At last the caravan was ready for the journey. The sun shone steadily, making the sand so hot that no one could walk upon it in the daytime. But at night both men and camels could travel easily. So Abdul the merchant said to the men, "Be ready to start after sunset tonight. Give the camels plenty of water to drink, and feed them well, for we shall have a long, hard journey." Abdul and his men traveled all that night. One man was the pilot. He rode ahead, for he knew the stars, and by them he could guide the caravan. At daybreak they stopped. They spread the canvas tents and fed the camels. They built fires, cooked the rice, and made cakes of the barley meal. During the day, the men rested in the shade of the tents. After the evening meal, the caravan started on its way again. They had traveled thus for 3 long, silent nights. Early on the third morning, the camels raised their heads, stretched their nostrils, and hastened eagerly forward. The pilot cried, "The camels smell water and grass. An oasis is near." Before long they could see palm trees, with their spreading leaves waving in the soft breeze. Joyfully they rested during the day. The camels drank freely from the cool spring. The men filled the great leather bottles with fresh water. In the evening, refreshed and happy, the men continued the journey. So they traveled, night after night, resting during the heat of the day. At last, one morning, the pilot said, "We shall soon reach the end of our journey." The men were very glad to hear this, for they were weary, and the camels needed rest. After supper that night, Abdul said, "Throw away the firewood and most of the water. It will lighten the burden of the camels. By tomorrow we shall reach the city." When the caravan started that evening, the pilot led the way as usual, but after a while, weary with many nights of watching, he fell asleep. All night long the caravan traveled. At daybreak the pilot awoke and looked at the last star, fading in the morning light. "Halt!" he called. The camels must have turned while I slept. We are at the place from which we started yesterday." There was no water to drink. There was no firewood to cook the food. The men spread the tents and lay down under them, saying, "The wood and the water are gone. We are lost." But Abdul said to himself, "This is no time to rest. I must find water. If I give way to despair, all will be lost." Then Abdul started away from the tent, watching the ground closely. He walked and walked. At last he saw a tuft of grass. "There must be water somewhere under the sand, or this grass would not be here," thought the merchant. He ran back to the tent, shouting and calling, "Bring an axe and a spade! Come quickly!" The men jumped up and ran with the merchant to the place where the grass was growing. They began to dig in the sand, and presently they struck a rock. Abdul jumped down into the hole and put his ear close to the rock. "Water! Water!" he cried. "I hear water running under this great rock. We must not despair." Then, raising his axe above his head, he struck a heavy blow. Again and again he struck the rock. At last the rock broke, and a stream of water, clear as crystal, filled the hole almost before the merchant could jump out of it. A shout of joy burst from the lips of the men. They drank the water eagerly, and afterwards led the camels to the spring. Then they set up a pole, to which they fastened a flag, so that other traders might find the well. In the evening, the men again started on their journey, and they reached the city the very next day. End of Story 34. Read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 35. Queen Hulda and the Flax, of Story Hour Reader's Third Year, by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. Queen Hulda and the Flax. There was a poor peasant, Hans by name. He lived with his wife and children in a valley at the foot of a snow-capped mountain. Hans often drove his sheep to pasture up the mountainside. He always carried his crossbow with him to protect the sheep. He was a skillful marksman. Once in a while, Hans would shoot a deer. The deer meat would serve as food for his family during many days. One day, Hans was watching his sheep while they grazed on the mountainside. Suddenly a deer appeared. Its spreading antlers glittered in the morning sunlight with wonderful brightness. The deer bounded across the pasture to the rocks higher up the mountain. Hans followed quickly, hoping to approach near enough to shoot an arrow. From rock to rock, higher and higher, Hans followed the deer, until at last they were at the summit of the mountain. They sped over the snow until the deer disappeared in the blue grotto. Hans followed more slowly, along a dark and narrow tunnel that led to the blue grotto. Suddenly he caught a glimpse of a bright light in the distance. He walked on, and soon reached a brightly lit cave. From the walls and ceiling of the cave hung many wonderful crystals and precious stones. A tall woman dressed in pure white stood in the midst of the cave. A golden girdle was fastened about her waist. A crown set with jewels rested on her head. In her hand she held a bunch of blue flowers. Lovely maidens in dainty robes, with graceful wreaths of alpine roses on their heads, attended their queen. Overcome with wonder, Hans knelt before the beautiful woman. As in a dream, he heard her say softly, "Choose for yourself what you will of my treasures, gold or silver or precious stones." "Most gracious queen," replied Hans, "I ask only for the flowers in your hand." The queen was pleased, and she gave the flowers to Hans at once. "You have chosen well," she said. "Take also these seeds and sow them in your fields." Suddenly a peal of thunder shook the grotto. When it had ceased, Hans found himself standing alone on the mountain. When Hans reached home, he showed his wife the blue flowers and the seeds that had been given him by the queen. "Wonderful crystals and precious stones hang from the walls and ceilings of the cave, but the queen is more beautiful than all," exclaimed Hans. "Why did you not choose some of the diamonds and gold?" cried his wife, and she scolded Hans roundly, because he had taken only flowers and seeds. Hans made no reply, but he went to the fields and ploughed the ground. Then he sowed carefully the seeds that the queen had given him. The weeks passed. Tiny green leaves began to show above the ground. The plants grew taller and taller, and then the blue flowers began to appear. The flowers were so beautiful that even the angry wife was pleased. She had never seen anything like them. Hans watched his fields day and night. One moonlight night, he saw the lovely queen of the blue grotto walking about among the flowers, with her maidens. They seemed to be guarding the blossoms. At last the flowers withered, and the seeds were ripe. Then the Queen of the Blue Grotto appeared at the cottage door. The Queen of the Blue Grotto said, "I am Queen Hulda. I have come to teach you how to spin and weave." "The blue flowers that your husband chose were the wonderful flax," added the Queen. "I love it very much." Queen Hulda taught Hans and his wife how to spin and weave linen cloth. Many people bought the linen and the flax seeds, so that Hans and his wife became very rich. Every year Queen Hulda and her maidens watched over the fields. Hans was very happy, because he had chosen the blue flowers of the wonderful flax. End of Story 35. Read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 6. Aladdin's Lamp, of Story Hour Reader's Third Year, by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. Aladdin's Lamp. Oh, whither away, ye children dear? To Fairy Grove in Wonderland. The trees bend low with a wondrous glow, diamonds and rubies the fruit, and lo, gather the gems, for you they grow. So hither hie, ye children dear, to Fairy Grove in Wonderland. Welcome, prince and princess gay, elf and fay and sprite at play, dancing till the dawn of day. Then hasten all, ye children dear, to enter the realm of Wonderland. No giant or genie need cause you alarm. Treasures they'll give, and keep away harm, for Aladdin's lamp is the hidden charm. End of Story 36. Read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 37. Aladdin and the Magic Lamp, of Story Hour Reader's Third Year, by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. Aladdin and the Magic Lamp. Aladdin was a poor boy who lived in a city of Persia. His mother was a widow. She supported herself by weaving mats. One day Aladdin was playing in the street. A tall, dark man stood watching him. When the game was finished, the man beckoned to Aladdin to come to him. "What is your name, my boy?" asked the man, who was a magician. "My name is Aladdin," answered the boy. He wondered who the stranger might be. "And what is your father's name?" the magician asked. "My father was Mustapha the tailor, but he died when I was only 2 years of age," replied Aladdin. "Alas!" cried the magician, pretending to weep. "He was my brother, and you must be my nephew. I am your long-lost uncle." Then he embraced Aladdin and gave him 5 gold coins, saying, "Come with me, and I will show you the sights." They went from the city, through pretty gardens, into the open country. They walked a long distance. The magician gave Aladdin some delicious fruit to eat, and told him wonderful stories. The lad scarcely noticed how far they had gone. At last they reached a valley between 2 mountains. The magician stood still for a moment and looked about him. "Ah!" he exclaimed, "this is the place for which I have been searching. Gather some sticks. I will kindle a fire." Soon the fire was burning merrily. The magician took a curious powder from his girdle. He mumbled strange words as he sprinkled it upon the flames. In an instant the earth beneath their feet trembled, and they heard a rumbling sound like distant thunder. Then the ground opened in front of them. There lay a large flat stone with a brass ring fastened to the top. "A wonderful treasure lies hidden below," said the magician. "Obey me, and it will soon be ours." Then Aladdin grasped the ring in the way the magician told him to do, and easily lifted the stone. "Now," said the magician, "go down the steps which you see before you. You will come to 3 great halls. Pass through the halls, but be careful not to touch anything, not even the walls, for if you do you will certainly die. When you have passed through the halls, you will reach a garden of fruit trees. In a niche in the garden wall you will see a lighted lamp. Put out the light, pour the oil from the bowl, and bring the lamp to me." Then the magician placed a magic ring upon Aladdin's finger, to guard him, and commanded him to go at once in search of the lamp. Aladdin found everything exactly as the magician had said. He went through the halls and the garden until he found the lighted lamp. When he had poured out the oil, and had placed the lamp inside his coat, he began to look about him. Upon the trees were fruits of every color of the rainbow. Some were clear as crystal, some were ruby red, and others sparkled with a green, blue, or purple light. The leaves of the trees were silver and gold. Aladdin did not know that these fruits were precious stones, diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and amethysts, but they looked so beautiful that he filled his pockets with them as he passed back through the garden. The magician stood at the top of the steps as Aladdin began to climb upward. "Give the lamp to me," he cried, holding out his hand. "Wait until I reach the top of the steps," Aladdin answered. "Hand the lamp to me at once," screamed the magician. "Not until I'm safely out," replied Aladdin. Then in a rage the magician rushed to the fire. He threw more of the curious powder upon the fire and muttered the same strange words as before. Instantly the stone slipped back into its place. The earth closed over it, and Aladdin was left in darkness. The magician at once left Persia and went to Africa. Poor Aladdin! He groped his way back through the halls to the beautiful garden of shining fruits, but he could find no way of escape. For 2 days he cried and shouted for help. At last, as he clasped his hands in despair, he happened to rub the magic ring which the magician had placed on his finger. Instantly a genie rose out of the earth and stood before him. "What is thy will, my master?" asked the genie. "I am the slave of the ring. I serve the one who wears it." "Deliver me from this place!" cried Aladdin. Scarcely had he spoken these words when the door opened. Aladdin found himself at his mother's door. He showed his mother the lamp and the colored fruit, which he still carried in his pockets. "I will tell you all that has happened," he said. "But first give me something to eat, for I am very hungry." "Alas!" said the mother, "I have neither money nor food." "Sell the old lamp that I brought back with me," said Aladdin. "The lamp would bring a higher price if it were clean and bright," replied his mother, and she began to rub the lamp. No sooner had she given the first rub than a great genie appeared. "What is thy will?" asked the genie. "I am the slave of the lamp. I serve the one who holds the lamp." Aladdin's mother was so terrified that she dropped the lamp. Aladdin managed to grasp it and say, "Bring me something to eat." The slave of the lamp disappeared. He returned, bringing a dainty breakfast served upon plates of pure gold. Aladdin now knew what use to make of the magic ring and the wonderful lamp. His mother and he lived happily for years. One day, the Sultan ordered all of the people to stay at home and close their shutters, while his daughter, the princess, passed by on her way to the bath. Aladdin had heard how beautiful the princess was, and he greatly desired to see her face. This seemed impossible, for the princess never went out without a veil which covered her entirely. He peeped through the shutters as she passed by. The princess happened to raise her veil, and Aladdin saw her face. The moment Aladdin's eyes rested upon the princess, he loved her with all his heart. "Mother," he cried, "I have seen the princess, and I have made up my mind to marry her. Go at once to the Sultan, and beg him to give his daughter to me." Aladdin's mother laughed at the idea. The next day, however, she went to the palace, carrying the magic fruit as a gift. No one paid any attention to her. She went every day for a week, before the Sultan noticed that she was there. "Who is the poor woman who comes here every day?" he asked. "Bring her forward. I wish to speak to her." Aladdin's mother knelt before the throne and told the Sultan of her son's love for the princess. "He sends you this gift," she continued, presenting the magic fruit. The Sultan was astonished at the gift. "Here, indeed, is a gift worthy of my daughter. Shall I not give her to the one who sends it?" Then the Sultan told Aladdin's mother to return in 3 months' time, and he would give the princess to her son in marriage. When the time had passed, Aladdin again sent his mother to the Sultan. "I shall abide by my word," said the Sultan, "but he who marries my daughter must first send me 40 golden basins filled to the brim with precious stones. These basins must be carried by 40 black slaves, led by 40 white ones, all of them dressed in rich attire." Aladdin's mother returned home. "Your hopes are ended," she cried. "Not so, mother," answered Aladdin. Then he rubbed the magician's lamp. When the genie appeared, Aladdin told him to provide the 40 golden basins filled with jewels, and the 80 slaves. When the procession reached the palace, the slaves presented the jewels to the Sultan. He was so delighted with the gift that he was willing to have Aladdin marry the princess without delay. "Go and tell your son that he may wed my daughter this very day," he said to Aladdin's mother. Aladdin was delighted to hear the news. He ordered the genie to bring a rich purple robe for him to wear, a beautiful white horse to ride upon, 20 slaves to attend him, 6 slaves to attend his mother, and 10,000 gold pieces to give to the people. At last everything was ready. Aladdin, dressed in his royal robe, started for the palace. As he rode on the beautiful white horse, he scattered the gold coins among the people. They shouted with joy as they followed the procession. At the palace the Sultan greeted Aladdin joyfully, and ordered the wedding feast to be prepared at once. But Aladdin said, "Not so, your Majesty. I will not marry the princess until I have built her a palace." Then he returned home, and once more summoned the Slave of the Lamp. "Build the finest palace in the world," ordered Aladdin. "Let the walls be of marble set with precious stones. In the center build a great hall whose walls shall be of silver and gold, lighted by great windows on each side. These windows are to be set with diamonds and rubies. Depart. Lose no time in obeying my commands." When Aladdin looked out of the window the next morning, there stood the most beautiful palace in the world. Then Aladdin and his mother returned to the Sultan's palace, and the wedding took place amid great rejoicing. Aladdin was gentle and kind to all. He became a great favorite at the court, and the people loved him well. For a time, Aladdin and his bride lived happily. But there was trouble coming. Far away in Africa, the magician who had pretended to be Aladdin's uncle heard of his escape with the magic lamp. The magician traveled from Africa to Persia, disguised as a merchant. He carried some copper coins and went through the streets of the city, crying, "New lamps for old!" Now it happened that Aladdin had gone hunting, and the princess sat alone near an open window. She saw the merchant and sent a slave to find out what the man called. The slave came back laughing. He told the princess that the merchant offered to give new lamps for old ones. The princess laughed too. Then she pointed to the old lamp that stood in a niche of the wall. "There is an old lamp," she said. "Take it and see if the man really will exchange it for a new one." When the magician saw the lamp, he knew that it was the one for which he was searching. He took the magic lamp eagerly and gave the slave all of the new lamps. Then the magician hurried out of the city. When he was alone, he rubbed the magic lamp, and the genie stood before him. "What is thy will, master?" said he. "I command thee to carry the palace of Aladdin, with the princess inside, to Africa," said the magician. Instantly the palace disappeared. The Sultan looked out of his window the next morning. No palace was to be seen. "This has been done by magic!" the Sultan exclaimed. He sent his soldiers to bring Aladdin home in chains. They met him riding back from the hunt. They carried him to the Sultan. When Aladdin was allowed to speak, he asked why he was made a prisoner. "Wretch!" exclaimed the Sultan. "Come, and I will show you." Then he led Aladdin to the window, and showed him that where the palace had been, there was only an empty space. Aladdin begged the Sultan to spare his life, and grant him 40 days in which to find the princess. So Aladdin was set free. He searched everywhere, but he could find no trace of the princess. In despair, he wrung his hands. As he did so, he rubbed the magic ring. Instantly, the slave of the ring appeared. "What is thy will, master?" asked the genie. "Bring back the princess and the palace," said Aladdin. "That is not within my power," said the genie. "Only the slave of the lamp can bring back the palace." "Then take me to the place where the palace now stands, and set me down under the window of the princess." Almost before Aladdin had finished these words, he found himself in Africa, beneath a window of his own palace. "Princess! Princess!" called Aladdin. The princess opened the window. With a cry of joy, Aladdin entered and embraced the princess. "Tell me, dear," he said, "what has become of the old lamp that stood in the niche of the wall?" "Alas!" replied the princess, "a man came through the streets crying, 'New lamps for old.' I gave him the lamp that stood in the niche, and the next I knew I was here." "The man is a magician. He wished only to secure the magic lamp," said Aladdin. "The magician is here," said the princess. "He carries the magic lamp hidden in his robes during the day, and he places it under his pillow at night." While the magician was sleeping that night, Aladdin stole softly into the room and took the magic lamp from under the pillow. Then he rubbed the lamp, and the genie appeared. "I command you to carry the princess and the palace back to Persia," cried Aladdin. The following morning, the Sultan looked out of the window. There, to his surprise, stood the palace of Aladdin, in the very place from which it had disappeared. Aladdin and the princess lived happily for many years. When the Sultan died, they ruled in his place. They were beloved by the people, and there was peace in all the land. End of Story 37. Read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 8. The Whiting and the Snail, of Story Hour Readers' Third Year, by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. The Whiting and the Snail. "Will you walk a little faster?" said a whiting to a snail. "There's a porpoise close behind us, and he's treading on my tail. See how eagerly the lobsters and the turtles all advance. They are all waiting on the shingle. Will you come and join the dance? You can really have no notion how delightful it will be, when they take us up and throw us with the lobsters out to sea." But the Snail replied, "Too far, too far," and gave a look askance, said he thanked the whiting kindly, but he would not join the dance. "What matters it how far we go?" his scaly friend replied. "There is another shore, you know, upon the other side. The further off from England, the nearer is to France. Then turn not pale, beloved Snail, but come and join the dance." By Lewis Carroll. End of Story 38. Read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 9. The Bonfire in the Sea, of Story Hour Reader's Third Year, by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. The Bonfire in the Sea. Long, long ago, in Australia, it is said, fishes could travel as easily on land as they could swim in water. It happened, so the story goes, that the whole fish tribe had been playing tag along a sandy beach near the sea. At last they became tired of the game. Fin, the leader of the fishes, said, "Let us coast down the great black rock." Now, beyond the level shore where the fishes had been playing tag, there were cliffs and rocks. Some of the rocks rose straight out of the water, while others sloped toward the sandy beach. High above the rest towered the great black rock. The fishes climbed to the top. Then, one after another, they followed the leader, each gliding head foremost down the rock. It was fine sport. Then the fishes formed a circle and danced, while Fin slid down the rock alone. Again and again he climbed to the top and slid down, as swiftly as an arrow glides from the bow. Finally he turned a somersault at the foot of the rock, and then called the fishes to stop dancing. "It is time to cook dinner," said Fin. "There is a good place for a camp under the trees on the tall cliff yonder." The fishes climbed to the top of the cliff overhanging the sea. They gathered wood and heaped it high at the edge of the cliff. When all was ready for the bonfire, Fin rubbed two sticks briskly together. Soon a spark fell upon the wood, and instantly the flames leaped upward. Then the fishes put some roots in front of the fire to roast. While the roots were cooking, the fishes stretched themselves under the trees. They had almost fallen asleep, when suddenly great drops of rain came splashing down. A dark cloud, which they had not noticed, had covered the sun. The rain fell hard and fast, and soon put out the fire. Now, you know, this was very serious, for people in those days had no matches, and it was difficult to light a fire. Then, too, an icy wind began to blow, and the fishes were soon shivering in the cold. "We shall freeze to death, unless we can build a fire again," cried Fin. He tried to kindle a flame by rubbing two sticks together. He could not produce even one spark. "It is of no use," said Fin. "The wood is too wet. We shall have to wait for the sun to shine again." A tiny fish came forward and bowed before Fin, saying, "Ask my father, Flying Fish, to light the fire. He is skilled in magic, and he can do more than most fishes." So Fin asked Flying Fish to light the fire once more. Flying Fish knelt before the smouldering ashes and fanned briskly with his fins. A tiny thread of smoke curled upward, and a feeble red glow could be seen in the ashes. When the tribe of fish saw this, they crowded close around Flying Fish, keeping their backs toward the cold wind. He told them to go to the other side, because he wanted to fan the fire. By and by, the spark grew into a flame, and the bonfire burned brightly. "Bring more wood!" cried Flying Fish. The fishes gathered wood and piled it upon the fire. The red flames roared and sputtered and crackled. "We shall soon be warm now," said Fin. Then the fishes crowded around the fire, closer and closer. Suddenly a blast of wind swept across the cliff from the direction of the land and blew the fire toward the fishes. They sprang back, forgetting that they were on the edge of the cliff. And down, down, down went the whole fish tribe to the bottom of the sea. The water felt warm, for the strong wind had driven the fire down below too. There, indeed, was the bonfire at the bottom of the sea, burning as brightly as ever. More wonderful still, the fire never went out, as fires do on land. The water at the bottom of the sea has been warm ever since that day. That is why, on frosty days, the fishes disappear from the surface of the water. They dive to the bottom of the sea, where they can keep warm and comfortable around the magic bonfire. At least, so some people say. End of Story 39. Read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Story 40. Robinson Crusoe, of Story Hour Readers' Third Year, by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. Robinson Crusoe. Many years ago, there lived in England a boy whose name was Robinson Crusoe. Though he had never been near the sea, Crusoe's dearest wish was to become a sailor, and go on a ship to foreign lands. This grieved his mother very much, and she begged the boy to remain at home. His father also warned him of danger, saying, "If you go abroad, you will be most miserable. I cannot give my consent." It happened that Crusoe visited Hull, a large town by the sea, to say good-bye to a companion who was about to sail for London. He could not resist the chance of going on a voyage, and without even sending a message to his father and mother, he went aboard the ship and sailed away. Robinson Crusoe met with many strange adventures at sea. On his first voyage, the ship was wrecked in a fearful storm, and the crew was saved by sailors from another ship. Next, Crusoe went on a voyage to Africa. On the way there, the ship was captured by pirates. The captain of the pirates made a slave of the boy. The man took Crusoe to his home and made him dig in the garden and work in the house. One day Crusoe hid some food in a small boat and managed to escape, with a boy. They sailed for many long days and nights, keeping close to shore. They did not dare to land, because of the lions and other wild animals. After a time they saw a Portuguese vessel. The captain allowed them to go aboard. This ship was bound for South America. They finally landed in Brazil. Robinson Crusoe lived on a plantation in Brazil for several years. He raised sugar and tobacco. For a time he was happy and made money. But Robinson Crusoe was never contented anywhere for very long. When a merchant asked him to go on another voyage to the coast of Africa, he consented, and he had soon started on this new venture. At first the weather was very hot. Then one day, without a warning, a hurricane burst upon them. The wind raged for 12 days, and the ship was nearly torn to pieces. No one expected to escape. After a time the wind abated somewhat. The captain ordered the course of the ship changed, but soon another storm followed, even worse than the first. Early one morning, while the wind was still roaring and the ship was rolling from side to side, a sailor who was peering through the fog suddenly cried out, "Land! Land!" At the same moment the vessel struck on a sandbar, with a grating sound. The waves dashed over the deck of the ship. With great difficulty the boats were lowered at the side of the ship. All the sailors climbed into the boats, for they knew not at what moment the ship would break into pieces. The men rowed bravely toward the shore, but suddenly a mountain-like wave rolled over them and upset the boats. Crusoe was a very fine swimmer, but no one could swim in such a sea. It was only good fortune and his alertness that landed him safely ashore. Wave after wave washed him farther and further upon the beach. At last a wave left him beside a rock, to which he clung until the water flowed back to the sea. Then he jumped up and ran for his life. Robinson Crusoe was the only person from the ship who was not drowned. He was thankful indeed for his escape. After resting for a time, Crusoe looked about him. He was wet, cold, and hungry. It was growing very dark, and he was afraid of wild animals. He found his knife still in his pocket, so he cut a stick with which to protect himself. Then he climbed into a tree and hid among the branches. He was soon sound asleep. When Crusoe awoke in the morning, the storm was over, and the sea was calm. He found that the ship had been driven by the waves much nearer to the shore. By noon the water was low. The tide had ebbed so far out that he could almost walk to the ship. He swam for a short distance. When he reached the vessel, he could find no way to climb up, but at last he discovered a rope hanging over the edge. By the help of the rope, he managed to pull himself to the deck. Everything in the stern of the ship was safe and dry, and the food was not spoiled. Crusoe filled his pockets with biscuits and ate them as he went about his work. He had no time to spare. Crusoe needed a boat, to carry to the shore many necessary things. "It is of no use to wish for a boat," he thought. "I must set to work to make one." First he took some spars of wood and a topmast or two that were on deck, and threw them overboard, tying each with a rope so that it would not drift away. Then he climbed down the side of the ship, and fastened the spars together to make a raft. It was a long time before he was able to make the raft strong enough to hold the things that he wished to take ashore. Crusoe loaded the raft with 3 seamen's chests. He had filled these chests with bread, rice, cheese, dried goat's flesh, and other articles of food. He also took all the clothing he could find. Then Crusoe dragged a carpenter's tool chest to the side of the ship. He placed this on the raft. Nothing on the ship was of more use to him than the tools in this chest. He secured guns, pistols, and shot, also 2 barrels of dry gunpowder. The trouble now was to land his cargo safely. Crusoe had only a broken oar, but he rigged up a sail, and the tide helped him. At last he reached the mouth of a little river. The strong tide carried him to land. He was able to push the raft into a little bay. When the tide flowed out, the raft was left high and dry on the sand, and everything was taken safely ashore. Then Crusoe thought he would look about the country. He climbed to the top of a high hill. He found that he was on an island, and that there was no sign of people, and nothing living in sight excepting great flocks of birds. Day after day, Crusoe returned to the ship. He built more rafts, and brought from the vessel everything that he considered useful. He made a tent of sails to protect the things that could be spoiled by the sun or rain. After several weeks the weather changed, and a high wind began to blow. One morning, when Crusoe awoke, he found that the ship had broken to pieces and was no longer to be seen. However, he had saved from the wreck everything that he needed. Then Robinson Crusoe decided to find a better place for his tent. There was a little plain on the side of a hill. At the further end was a rock with a hollow place like the entrance to a cave, but there was really not any cave or any way into the rock at all. Here he placed his tent. In a half circle in front of the tent, Crusoe drove 2 rows of strong stakes sharpened at the top, about 6 inches apart. He laid pieces of rope between the stakes. The fence was about 5½ feet high, and so strong that no one could enter. There was no door, so Crusoe climbed in and out by means of a ladder, which he always drew up after him. Before closing up the end of the fence, Crusoe carried within all the articles that he had saved from the wreck. He rigged a double tent inside the fence, to protect all from the sun and rain. When this was finished, Crusoe began to dig out the rock. It was not very hard, and soon behind his tent he had a cave, in which he placed his powder in small parcels. Robinson Crusoe was very comfortable. He had saved from the wreck 2 cats and a dog. He had ink, pens, and paper, so that he could write down all that happened. "But what shall I do when the ink is gone?" thought Crusoe. "I must find some way of keeping track of the time." He set up a wooden cross, upon which he cut with a knife the date of his landing. Each day he cut another notch in the wood. Every 7th notch was twice as long as those for the days between, and the notch for every 1st day of the month was twice as long again. Thus Crusoe kept a calendar, or weekly, monthly, and yearly reckoning of time. By and by he found that there were many goats on the island, and many pigeons, which he could obtain for food. After a time, Crusoe decided that his cave was too small. As he was sure that there were no wild beasts on the island, he began to make his cave larger, and he finally built a tunnel through the rock outside his fence. Then he began to hang his belongings upon the sides of the cave, and to arrange them in order. He even built shelves on the walls, and made a door for the entrance. He also made a table and some chairs. During all this time, Robinson Crusoe climbed the hill daily. He looked over the lonely waters, hoping, always hoping, to see the sail of a ship. At last he gave up all hope of ever leaving the island. Several years passed by. The clothing that Crusoe had saved from the ship was worn out. He made himself clothes from the skins of the goats on the island. He also made an umbrella of goat skins, to shield him from the hot rays of the sun. Though the food which he had taken from the ship had long since been eaten, he raised plenty of barley from seeds which he had found in a little bag on the ship. The goats and pigeons on the island supplied him with meat. He had become very tired of never hearing a voice. There were many green parrots among the trees, and he decided to catch one and teach it to talk. He found it difficult to obtain one, but finally he did catch a young parrot. At first he could not teach it to say a word, but at last, when he came back to his tent from a day on the island, the parrot called, "Robin, Robin Crusoe! Poor Robin Crusoe, where have you been?" One morning, as Crusoe started for his canoe, a strange thing happened. He was walking along, and what do you suppose he saw? The print of a man's foot in the sand. The sight made him cold all over. He looked around. He listened, but there was not a sound, yet there in the sand was the print of a man's foot, the toes, the heel, and the sole. He did not go to the boat. Instead, he hastened back to his cave. He was so frightened that it was some time before he ventured out again. About a year after this, Crusoe was surprised one morning to see a bonfire on the shore. He looked through his spyglass and saw a company of savages, who had landed in canoes and had built a fire. They had 2 prisoners whom they were about to kill. One of them saw a chance to escape, and he made a sudden dash for his life, running with great speed straight toward Robinson Crusoe. Crusoe rescued the man. The man was very grateful. Crusoe made him to understand after a time that his name was to be Friday. It was on Friday that the man had been saved. Crusoe taught him to say yes and no, and also to say master. Friday became the faithful servant and companion of Robinson Crusoe. Many more years passed. One morning Friday came running toward Crusoe, shouting, "Master! Master! They come!" Crusoe ran to the beach and looked toward the sea. There he saw a large sailing vessel making for the shore. The sailing vessel proved to be an English ship. Crusoe's stay on the desert island had come to an end. When he took leave of the island, he carried on board the sailing vessel his goatskin cap and umbrella, also the parrot. So after 28 long years Robinson Crusoe and his faithful servant Friday sailed away. The voyage was long and hard, but at last they reached the coast of England. End of Story 40, read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 1. The Wonderful World of Story Our Reader's Third Year, by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. The Wonderful World. Great, wide, beautiful, wonderful world, with the wonderful water round you curled, and the wonderful grass upon your breast, world, you are beautifully dressed. The wonderful air is over me, and the wonderful wind is shaking the tree. It walks on the water, and whirls the mills, and talks to itself on the tops of the hills. You, friendly earth, how far do you go, with wheat fields that nod, and rivers that flow, and cities and gardens, and oceans and isles, and people upon you for thousands of miles? Ah, you are so great, and I am so small, I can hardly think of you, world, at all. And yet when I said my prayers today, a whisper within me seemed to say, you are more than the earth, though you are such a dot. You can love and think, and the earth cannot. End of Story 41, read by Sibella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Story 42, The Magic Girdle of Story Our Reader's Third Year, by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. The Magic Girdle. Once upon a time, a little cobbler sat at his bench mending a pair of shoes. He whistled a merry tune as he worked. The day was very warm, and the wax which he had been using began to melt. In less time than it takes to tell it, a swarm of flies lighted upon the melting wax. "Ho, ho!" exclaimed the little cobbler. "Who invited you to a feast?" He threw the shoe that he was mending at the flies, and many fell dead from the blow. The cobbler counted the flies as they lay dead, and he said, "Not so bad. That blow should make me famous." Then the cobbler took a girdle and painted this rhyme upon it: "Ha, ha! Ho, ho! 10 at one blow." "Now I shall travel around the world wearing this girdle, and it will make me famous," said the cobbler. So the queer little man put on the girdle and started out to seek his fortune. As he was entering a forest, he saw a bear walking along a narrow path. The cobbler was frightened. There was no way of escape. He waited to see what would happen. The bear growled and ran toward him. The cobbler stood with his girdle in sight. The bear read the words on the girdle: "Ha, ha! Ho, ho! 10 at one blow." "Is it possible that this little man can kill 10 bears at one blow?" thought the bear. "I will be careful not to offend him." So the bear stood still and said, "Where are you going, my friend?" "Around the world to seek my fortune," proudly replied the cobbler. "Stay here for a time and dine with me. I know where there is some choice honey," said the bear, and he led the way to a hollow tree where the bees had stored their honey. But a hunter had set a trap in the tree, and as the bear reached for the honey, snap! His paw was caught fast in the trap. And that was the end of Mr. Bear. The cobbler quickly stripped off the skin of the animal, saying, "This will make a fine warm blanket." And he walked away, carrying the skin over his arm and whistling a merry tune. At last the cobbler reached the edge of the forest and began to climb a hill. Sitting on a rock overlooking the valley below was a giant. The cobbler's heart beat fast with fear. He walked bravely up to the giant, with his girdle in plain sight. "Good day, friend," said the cobbler. "Here you sit at your ease. Do you not wish to travel with me to see the world?" the cobbler added. When the giant saw the little stranger walking up to him so boldly, he was greatly surprised. "How dare you enter the land of the giants?" he was about to exclaim. At that moment he saw the girdle and read the words, "Ha, ha, ho, ho, 10 at one blow." "Is it possible that this little man can kill 10 giants at one blow?" thought the giant. "I will be careful not to offend him." So the giant said, "Good day, my friend. I see that though you are a little man, you have great strength. Let us prove which of us is the stronger." Then the giant led the cobbler to a great oak tree that had fallen to the ground. "Help me carry this tree to yonder cave," he said. "Certainly," said the cobbler. "You take the trunk on your shoulder, and I will carry the top branches of the tree, which of course are the heaviest part." The giant laid the trunk of the tree on his shoulder, but the cobbler sat at his ease among the branches, enjoying the ride. So the giant, who could not see what was going on behind him, had to carry the whole tree, and the little man in the bargain. There the cobbler sat, in the best of spirits, whistling a merry tune as though carrying a tree was mere sport. At last the giant could bear the weight no longer, and he shouted, "Hi, hi! I must let the tree fall." Then the cobbler sprang nimbly down, seized the tree with both hands, as if he had carried it all the way, and called to the giant, "Think of a big fellow like you not being able to carry a tree!" "Well," said the giant, "I will admit that you are the stronger. Come and spend the night in my cave." The cobbler followed the giant into the cave. There, sitting around a fire, were a number of giants. They were laughing and talking in a noisy manner, and they scarcely noticed the little man. The cobbler spread the bear's skin upon the floor near the fire. Then he lay down and pretended to sleep, but all the time he was watching to find a way of escape. At about midnight the giants went to bed, and they were soon sleeping soundly. The cobbler seized a club which belonged to one of the giants, placed the bear's skin over his arm, and tiptoed out of the cave. He was soon far away from the giants. After many days, the cobbler reached the courtyard of the king's palace. He was very tired, so he spread the bear's skin upon the grass and lay down upon it. He placed the giant's club by his side. Soon he was fast asleep. Presently one of the king's soldiers came near. He was surprised to find the little man sleeping there, with a giant's club by his side. Then he spied the girdle and read the words, "Ha, ha, ho, ho, 10 at one blow." "Indeed," thought the soldier, "this little man must have killed 10 bears at one blow, and 10 giants besides." Then the soldier hurried away and told every one he met about the queer little man. The news spread until it reached the king. "Bring this mighty man to me," the king commanded. When the king read the words upon the girdle, he said, "You are the very one I wish to have fight for me in a time of war." "I am ready to fight for you, O king," said the cobbler. The king at once appointed the cobbler commander of his army. Not long after this, a war broke out. The king promised the hand of his daughter to the man who should conquer the enemy. The little cobbler, riding upon a white horse, commanded the king's army. What a queer leader he was! About his shoulders was thrown the bear's skin, held firmly by the wonderful girdle, and in one hand he carried the giant's club. When the enemy advanced, and the leader saw the queer commander of the king's army, he smiled and said, "We have little to fear from such a commander." Then he saw the curious girdle and read the famous words, "Ha, ha, ho, ho, 10 at one blow." "Is it possible that this little man can kill 10 commanders at one blow?" thought the leader. He turned his horse quickly and gave orders for the army to retreat. The cobbler followed the enemy and soon overtook the leader, whom he made prisoner. When the king saw the cobbler returning with the leader, he was delighted. But all at once he remembered the reward that he had promised to the victor. The princess refused to become the bride of one so small and so ugly as the cobbler. "What shall I do?" asked the king. "A king should never break his promise." Then the princess whispered to the king, "Try to take the little man's girdle from him. He will then lose his power." So the king said to the cobbler, "You may have the hand of the princess if you will give your girdle to me." This made the cobbler very unhappy, for he knew what good fortune the girdle had brought to him. But he smiled and answered in a cheerful voice, "I shall be honoured if your majesty will accept my girdle." He handed the precious girdle to the king. At that moment something wonderful happened. Instead of an ugly little man, there stood a tall, handsome youth. The princess was very willing to become the bride of so handsome a youth. The king now gladly gave his consent to the marriage. Next day a great wedding feast was spread in honour of the marriage. After the king's death, the princess and her husband ruled the country. The magic girdle was placed over the throne. Ever afterwards, when the new king and queen appeared, the people would shout with great pride, "Ha, ha, ho, ho! 10 at one blow." End of Story 42. End of Story Hour Readers Book 3 by Ida Coe and Alice Christie. Read by Sibella Denton for LibriVox.org in November 2008. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org.